Welcome to your first board meeting. And we're glad you're here. Couldn't vote otherwise.
It would have been their voting. I had one at the basketball game today and one at cheerleading, so I was like, I wanted to be here about 20 minutes ago.
Well, I need your help in moving the meeting along, since we've only got 3 members. Tommy's going to make the motion. Let's begin at the beginning. Elliot's not here. And so Dr. Seitz will chair the meeting as she would normally, because we don't really have a chair or vice chair until we are, but since it's our annual meeting. If I think I will nominate Elliot as chair and Tommy as second. And Tommy's going to nominate
That
me
one
as vice
and
chair.
over. That one's like super intense.
Yeah. Then what?
Pointed out, I looked
I'll
right at
call for-
Yeah, I know, now you can't see.
it. No, I'm just seeing concert.
You
Did
want
the
to
same
make
thing.
a motion, Tommy will second, and he makes the motion, and he'll second it.
Thank you.
You just do that. I do it all the time at work.
Don't, the chair can either make the motion or second.
Sometimes I was without
I'm
having.
running the
Put
meeting.
down. It's
Wow,
crazy.
you're not gonna like jumping in with your both feet.
All right.
I was getting. Once I messed around with that.
Right now, it's like-
Think out.
I'm gonna open it.
Oh, sorry.
You can use it for.
We'll put it.
Oh, no worries.
Right.
No worries.
It's over to you. Library lamps. Well, look like.
I'm in a lucky spot. I've got.
You got yours is shining right on your book.
I was on the phone with Kim and I said.
Treat your orders seriously.
What's that?
I mean, Aaron.
Yeah, she actually.
She sounds terrible.
Yeah,
And I was
and she came in.
Is it- Hey, how are you?
Got an office room.
No.
I was on the phone with.
We're not going to go to session, so we're just gonna go right. Have to sit down.
I thought about that after texting back. I was so. I wonder if she knows where to go.
But you were still in college.
When you text me,
Oh.
I had not even got here.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
I was
I just heard.
Oh, good.
You're good. All right. About songs. All right, I will call the January 2024 annual school board meeting to order and ask that we all stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At our annual January meeting, the school board conducts its election of officers. So at this time, I ask if there is a nomination for a chairman.
I nominate Elliot Reed as chair.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So at this time, I would turn the meeting over to the chairman, but Mr. Reed's work schedule does not allow him to be here this evening, so I will call for a nomination for the vice chair.
I nominate Dr. Burnett.
I second.
Any discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
And Dr. Burnett, I will now turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Seitz. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Request that we move action item to before old business.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So the next item on the agenda are public announcements.
There's some other things with the annual meeting on the recommendation of the school board clerk and then setting the meeting.
So I think that one of the things we need to cover today is the appointment of the school board clerk and the assistant clerk. Dr. Seitz, do you have any recommendations?
I do. I recommend Kim Bagby as the school board clerk and Karen Murray as the deputy clerk.
And I believe that the school board then approves that those recommendations. So, is there any discussion from either member of the school board present tonight? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. What?
Certain dates and times.
Okay, so the next item, we're still in the annual meeting. Do I hear a motion as to when our meeting dates and times should occur over the course of this next year? You want to keep them the same?
Yeah, I make a motion to leave the meeting times and leave it the same.
All right.
I second.
Any discussion? I assume not. All in favor?
Aye.
Anything else on the annual meeting, Dr. Seitz?
That's it.
I think we're finished with that. Then we'll go on to public announcements. Are there any announcements from myself? I don't have any announcements. Do you have any announcements?
I do not.
Okay, then we'll move on to recognitions from the superintendent.
All right, and what I wanted to do this evening was recognize and welcome our two new school board members, Mr. Kennedy and Ms. Robbins. It's a little bit of a unique meeting for you all to start tonight, since we have a couple of other regular members absent just due to work at other events that put them outside of the area. But I welcome you to the board, and I know that you'll find that it's a good experience, and you'll be very productive and great resources to our division. So thank you for being here.
So then we have educational highlights as next. Dr. Seitz, I understand we have some presentations from MES.
That's correct. We'll have Mrs. Daniel come to the podium and announce what she's presenting to this evening.
Good evening, members of the board. I am excited to share with you tonight a recognition, well, more so a project that stemmed prior to this recognition. But in the fall, we were made aware after an application process facilitated and spearheaded by third grade teacher, Mrs. Shores, that we were one of 75 grants received out of 51 Virginia localities for Virginia Agriculture in the Classroom Awards. The grant was intended to engage students in experiences related to gardening, related to animal agriculture, nutrition, STEM integration, and leadership development. And few years ago, well, I say a few years ago, a while ago, there was a garden put in place at MES. And as you can imagine, anytime you take on a project, there has to be someone to follow through with that project, and time goes and people come and go. And so for a while, we had a beautiful pile of weeds at MES. And so last year, Miss Shores and the third grade group took it and brought it back to life as its intended purpose of a garden. So I wanted her to be able to share with you tonight this project and initiative, and a little bit more about how these funds have been used and will be used to help support our students' agricultural development here at MES.
Hello. So the funds have not been used yet, but they will be. I started it last year because, as everyone knows, doing is a much better way to learn when they are involved. And I am the science social studies teacher in third grade. So I looked at that conglomerate of mess outside of my window on most days, and it was overgrown and just crazy. So I thought it'd be a good idea to turn it into a garden. And at that time, I thought it'd be a great idea to have two gardens. So there was a vegetable garden and then there was a flower garden. That's not the case this year. One of them got X'd. So my brother, Bill Harris, came and helped me kill weeds, pull weeds, and on the hottest day in July, he taught me how to drive a tractor and pull boards up that were there and then plow, and then we had to go get all kinds of stuff to go in the ground and make it a little bit better. But we did, and started the garden last year. How do you go to another slide? Oh, Steve? Is this it? Oh, okay. Okay. So concepts taught through gardening, of course, soil and the parts of soil, plant parts, especially they were more interested in not like the leaf, the stem, the blossom, whatever. They wanted to know which parts they could eat and which parts they couldn't. The impact of the water cycle, plant needs, natural resources. We just finished our unit on animals, which included omnivores, herbivores, carnivores, and we also had some herbivores that would visit our garden. So they researched ways that we could deter those animals. So we did plant some marigolds around the border. It did not help. And then ways to make the garden better. We needed weed killer, and of course we can't use weed killer. So we did find vinegar, water, and Dawn soap will kill weeds. This is a before, and then that's after it was plowed. Okay, I'm not touching anything, but I will. So this is students this year. They did enjoy 4 huge crowns of broccoli. I had one mom contact me and say that her child would not eat the broccoli that she had fixed because she informed her that it had been on a truck for weeks and sat in a warehouse and had been sprayed with things, and she was not going to eat it. So we talk about farm to table and just the resources of actually getting in the dirt and being able to grow your own food. We did, the PTO was wonderful. They asked what I needed, and I just said if I could have a raised flower bed, that would be great, because weeds are horrible, and then the rain is so bad that sometimes we just can't go out there for days. But they didn't buy me one, they bought 6. And Mr. Jeff put them all together. And then parents sent donations of potting soil and things in to fill the actual flower beds or raised garden. Kids that don't necessarily make some of the greatest grades or are not motivated in the classroom are super motivated to go into that garden. I've never seen kids that really want to pull a weed. So we had a lot of weed pullers. They were taught tools and safety with the tools. They knew that the the rakes had to face down and they'd all step on them to make sure that they were in the ground securely. We talked about water as our resource, and they knew not to leave the garden hose on, and they made sure it was turned off, and someone always checked. Behind us, garden safety, water conservation. These are some students working in the garden. The cabbage was humongous. Those are little cabbages. There was kale, spinach, lettuce, broccoli, a hot pepper that one student thought it would be good to eat when I said not to, but he won't do it again. Cabbage. And then we did have some students brought in some mums for fall. We planted by seed, and then we also planted a seedling. And everything grew. Last year we had radishes that were amazing, and kids ate those radishes. A little ranch will do you. We did a collab with the pre-K students after we noticed that they were eating the kale over the fence. So we thought that we should just do a little lesson with them, and it was wonderful. Our third graders turned into the teachers. We also did a lesson with an exploding pumpkin and talked about a chemical physical change with that for Halloween with the pre-K. We talked about safety in the garden, and they got to, as you can see, they each got a garden glove, but just one. And they spread some soil for us and made room for us to plant some more things. And this is some more cute pictures. And then a big thank you to the MES PTO, my brother, Mr. Jeff, and really hot day. I plan to use the money. We're going to buy bulbs. So this spring, the kids want to plant flowers, and they have come up with maybe that if we plant enough, we could have little bundles and either have them delivered maybe to some shut-ins or at least to the nursing home here in Locust Hill to brighten someone's day, if we have enough. And then if someone said that maybe we could use them for the graduation or things like that. So they're thinking. I do have Mr. Kennedy's daughters last year, Quinn and Nicole, were the OG gardeners because they were in the first round, and Riley Lawrence is here, and she was also one of the original gardeners. So I don't know how much longer I'll be teaching, but I want this garden to stay. Thank you.
Lots of lessons learned. It's time now for public comments. Do we have any public comments?
We have Mr. Caesar Gresham of Locust Hill. Okay. Miss Davelin Gresham of Urbana. Okay, thank you. That's all done for that.
All right, public comments are closed. Board member comments. Well, you haven't had any committee meetings. Would you like the floor to say anything at all?
Not at this time.
All right. No, I have no comment. How about Candace Brown? Do you have any comments?
No, at the moment.
All right, then we'll move on to action items. Dr. Sykes.
All right, action items, and we have one action item, and that is a policy on first read. That is policy GCBD, staff leaves and absences. We actually have GCBD-R, which are the regulations that cover the definitions and all of the ins and outs of staff absences. We just needed the policy to go along with the regulations. So as you can see, it's pretty brief because it does point to the regulations for everything else that we followed for staff absences.
Are there any questions from board members about the policy GCBD on the first reading? No, I haven't. It is rather short. We'll vote on it, I guess, at our next meeting.
Right.
Moving on to information items. Dr. Bishop.
Yes, members of the board, Dr. Seitz. I'm just going to do a brief kind of rundown of where we are with our curriculum for this year. Of course, the Virginia Literacy Act was passed in 2022, and that's effective in 24-25. So next year, all of that is on the way. We're really preparing our teachers with the science of reading, which is that's the biggest part of that Virginia Literacy Act. We're aligning our curriculum, and we have committees together who are looking at the curriculum that has been approved by the Virginia Department of Education that is based on the science of reading for students in K through 3. So we're working through all of that, and we shall, our plan is to present that to the board in April for adoption. And we're continuing to, I know that Mr. Dunkel is going to be on a call with Virginia Department of Education with regard to how we are communicating our efforts in growth testing to the parents. So that's on the way as well. In terms of history and social science, those were adopted in 2023. So last year, those will be implemented in 25-26. So this year, as well as next, we're looking at those standards and where we're going to place those and prepare our teachers for that. Of course, the math, those were approved in August 31 of 2023. So this year, those standards will be tested this year with the old standards. The following year is going to be with the new standards. So 2025 with the new standards. There's no crosswalk year, but our math teachers are looking at all those standards and unpacking the new standards and knowing where they are going with those. So it's a lot of work on our teachers to do that. So hats off to our math teachers as well. And then the science that is going to be up for they'll adopt the standards in 2025, the new standards, and they will be full implementation in 26. So kind of a brief kind of rundown of all the changes that are happening with those. And just one more item, and that is just the tutoring program this year. It's going very well. Both Ms. Daniel and Dr. Sanders are working on their schedules this year to make sure that that's kind of integrated into the schedule. There's still integration into there, but our plan is to really do that intervention and support within the school day. So that's our plan for next year.
So has the tutoring actually begun?
The tutoring has begun. Yep.
How many students are involved?
I'm gonna look at the 78,
That's just at the elementary.
just at the elementary. I think we have
It's
more.
like
Okay, 72.
about 150 students.
Mhm.
About 150.
Yeah.
That's good.
And attending regularly. So
All right, thank you, Dr. Bishop. Dr. Seitz, budget discussion.
Budget discussion. And so I just have a few slides to go through. I'll let you just flip through those and I'll just stay here. To give you an overview of where we are, as you're probably aware, the governor did release his budget, which is biennial budget, goes over the next 2 years, which is what we consider fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 26 for us. And so just before I even get into any of this, the governor releases a budget and then the General Assembly goes into session this week. The Senate will propose their own budget. The House will propose their budget. At some point in time, we get to a point where they come together with some agreements and then they have the final budget that they send to the governor. And then the governor approves that. Last year, that unfortunately did go rather long and we had a skinny budget that was approved at the last minute, because for us, the fiscal year starts July 1. And that one wasn't approved until the end of June. And then it was amended when the General Assembly came back into session in September. We had an amended budget, and we since then have also now had a caboose budget, which I'm actually not going to refer to in this presentation because I'm specifically looking at fiscal year 25. And so when I reference variables related to funding, these are the variables that affect our state funding and how the state determines how much money actually comes to us as a school division. And so the first thing is our student enrollment. And so for this current year that we're in, we based it on 1,150 students. And we say an ADM of 1,150, which is our average daily membership. We are steady right now at 1,150. And so going into next year's budget, we'll base those numbers and that calculation on the same ADM of 1,150. And that's how the state, then when they go through their basic aid formulas, determine how much actually comes to us. Another thing that affects us, you'll hear us often refer to SOQ funded positions. SOQ is standards of quality, and that's what the state has defined as what positions that they will fund within a school division. They do not fund all of them. In fact, they only fund approximately 49, maybe closer to 50% now that they fund. And when I say fund, they still don't fully fund all of those positions. That goes through some other formulas, the next of which is the composite index of the local ability to pay, which we refer to as the LCI. Every 2 years, that is re-benchmarked. And so we've just gotten the new number that'll cover FY25 and FY26. Unfortunately, that has also gone up a little bit for us. We were at a 0.6324. Over the next 2 years, we'll be at a 0.6389. And what that means is the state looks at that as Middlesex County has the ability to support just about 64% of our budget. And the state will fund approximately 36%. Again, they just fund, when it comes to positions, comes to the SOQ or standards of quality positions. So that's just a quick overview of how the funding does come to us. These are preliminary budget revenue numbers from the governor's proposed budget. The calculation tool, or as you'll hear us refer to, the calc tool just came out Thursday evening, and so Ms. Murray was just able to get all of these numbers pulled and processed for us as of this morning to speak a little bit about for this evening. You'll see that the largest impact, and when I say impact, I mean lack of fundings that we will receive, are from the incentive programs, and then also lottery funded programs. Our SOQ accounts, which is the first one, which again is considered our basic aid and is tied to the positions and other program pieces that they do fund, that is up slightly. The incentive programs are mainly, well, let's see, it was mainly the compensation supplement and supplemental payments in lieu of the food and hygiene tax. So when that tax was reduced by the governor, they did put some additional supplements in to help divisions because we do receive some of those funds. And then re-benchmarking, hold harmless, that was some additional funds they put in because when some re-benchmarking is done, it can, it impacts divisions if your LCI and things like that go up, there can be a significant impact. All of those additional supplements are pulled out going into the FY25 budget, which is why you see such a decrease there. The other one is in the lottery fund, and you hear all the time how lottery funds do go to schools, and they do, but sometimes it's a little bit of a shell game on how things come from the state. And so they moved actually the at-risk add-on, that was in the lottery funds. They did move that up into the incentive programs, not all of it, just a portion of it. And so you see that's why there's an impact there. We are receiving cuts to the K-3 primary class size reduction and to special education regional tuition. And so those are really just some basic overviews on why those areas look like the cuts are as significant as they are. And so just as an overview of the things that do impact us going into actually each fiscal year, for health insurance, we will have that final number on what that looks like mid-February, but right now what we are looking at is a 1.8% increase. That's actually better than last year. I think last year we had At this time of the year, we were looking at over a 12% increase. Anthem did cap that at 10% last year, so we certainly are not in the same situation we were in last year, but it does look like there's going to be somewhat of an increase for this year. We'll know more mid-February. VRS, I touched on this at last month's meeting. This usually in past years has not been something that impacts us like this. But a couple of things come into play. So every 2 years, the VRS board certifies the employer rate, what each employer is responsible for that goes towards the VRS. And the board proposed reducing that from 16.62 to 14.21, which would have been a savings for all employers. The governor, though, gets to make that final decision. And in his budget, he's only reduced the employer share down to 15.23%, which still would have been a savings, except that there's some new pieces that come into play with VRS for hybrid employees. They have a defined benefit and they can have a defined contribution to that. And there's a split in how VRS is going to be collecting that from employers, and beginning on July 1. It requires a defined employer contribution matched to standalone, meaning there is an additional cost to employers. And so if the rate stays at 15.23%, with the addition of the standalone match that the employers are responsible for, right now we're looking at $106,000 increase on the VRS side of things. Maintenance and operations, they're just naturally each year are additional costs related to fuel, parts, repairs. Custodial contract has an increase each year. Honeywell, which is all of our HVAC and such systems, there's always an increase. We experience increases in utilities, insurances, subscriptions, and purchase services. And I kind of lumped technology into that also, just as those are things that naturally go up each year and don't typically go down. So we have increases there. As for positions, looking into next year, we have some positions that we had funded through federal funds through the ESSER grant that came to all the school divisions once the pandemic was started. Some of those we needed just to be able to stay open and operate. And we'll look to move those positions into a budget that's funded by us. For example, our elementary mathematics coach was a position we created there to help students in that area. We had building-based substitutes in all 3 of our schools. And so those were people that we had that were there full-time. And so no matter where the need was or the absence was on any given day, we already had somebody in place to help cover there. And then we added an assistant in the clinic. The majority of that time is spent at the elementary school. That's where we have the largest student population. We have 600 little ones there. So there's an assistant there. And then she has been able to fill in whenever there's an absence or a need at the other 2 schools. So those are positions that have been grant funded that we'll look at trying to move into the next year's budget. With the new Virginia Literacy Act requirement, will be a new position at the middle school for a reading specialist. We have one at the elementary school. And even though we have a literacy specialist who oversees the entire division, there's a need for a reading specialist at St. Paul Walker. And then the last position is we are interested in trying to move our carpentry teacher at the high school from a part-time position to a full-time position as we expand that program. So those will be pieces that we're looking at, certainly that are on the expenditure side of things as we work on the new budget. And compensation, that's something that we'll be making some decisions on as we move forward. Some of the wording in the governor's budget was a proposed 1% bonus for FY25 and then a 2% compensation increase for FY26, which is not until the following school year, actually. As I said before, both the Senate and the House will create their own budgets, and there could be some other compensation supplements that fall into that, and we'll just have to wait and see what that may look like as we move forward. A step increase is about a 1.3% increase, and what a step increase means is that when we have this for all of our staff members, it says they have finished the year and now have another year of experience behind them. There's a there's an increase on a step that they have on a salary scale. Just as a reminder, though, I think, this may be a little bit forgotten because the past few years, the governor's budget has included a compensation supplement, which is actually unusual in, a state budget for many years. That's not been something that's been included, and it has been up to localities to support that funding. So that's another piece that we will work through as we move through this budget. And then the last slide just notes that we do have a work session scheduled with just our board on, January 30th, and then another work session between our board and the Board of Supervisors. That will be in February. So I'm happy to answer any questions on the overview. We'll certainly have more specifics and details as we move through the next.
Questions or comments from the board members?
Not at this time.
I've got a couple. I would expect the incentive amount to go up as the General Assembly adds different incentives for us to teach students or special students.
I would certainly hope so. I had been in contact with Delegate Hodges, even on the caboose budget, because there's some proposed cuts in that also. And I've already reached out to him about some hold harmless funds to help us, you know, and he's certainly aware of that, as are members of the General Assembly. And I think we will see some other things come through.
And on the health insurance, are we sharing that policy with other Middlesex employees? Is that a combined effort on the insurance?
It is just for the school and the county are separate. The school division and the county are separate.
Okay.
So we looked at last year, we used the same local choice representative, and we looked at combining the two programs, but it would have been much more expensive for the county. And so we did not move forward with a combination.
Okay. I'm glad we looked at it.
We did, yes.
All right. The calendar, Dr. Seitz.
Calendar, yes. So in your packet also is a draft calendar for 24-25, and this is a draft calendar. It is very similar to the current calendar that we are operating on now. It is a 177-day calendar. Winter break was a little bit easier to schedule just based on where Christmas fell, and so it certainly, I think it's the same number of days, but it looks like it's 2 full weeks with weekends around both sides of that. We did add 3 additional early release days for students, and that was to accommodate additional professional development or workday time that we could build into the day and not have to build into after school hours. And so that's really the only new piece, and it does have school ending on May 30th with the graduation of May 31st if this calendar stays in place. Our next steps are a survey will go out tomorrow to staff and families to provide feedback on the calendar. We also then will again review it at our superintendent's advisory committee, which meets later this month, and that's representatives from each of the schools. And then the plan is to bring it back to you at the February board meeting for a vote on the calendar for next year. But I'm also happy to answer any questions that you may have this evening.
Any questions from board members on the proposed calendar? Then the last information item is amendments to the budget calendar.
Yes, and so you'll see that there's a new budget calendar in your packet. The only amendment is we added a date for the work session. I think we originally had that as to be determined with this board, and that will be on January 30th at 4:30, and that's at the Cook's Corner Office Complex.
Thank you. Then we're finished with our information items, and we'll now move on to our second public comment session.
All right, Mr. Caesar Gresham of Locust Hill. All righty, Ms. Davelyn Gresham of Urbana.
Like had
It was already
it was
there.
there. Okay. Okay, good evening. I'm Jalen Gresham of Urbana, Virginia. And Happy New Year. I certainly do hope 2020 and 2023 was when it comes to the school system here in Middlesex. The first question I have is the chart that was put up during the last session. And it pointed out that Black and special ed children were low, they were in a low percentile. I want to know what was done to create a that to be eliminated. Because there was at the time, and we're already at the end of the first quarter. So, you know, what's being done? There needs to be, my bad. That needs to be addressed. Can you hear me now? Thank you. And I would hope that would be by the next session that we would have an answer and a problem to solve, to solve that problem, because we don't want these children to get any further behind. And if it's not addressed, they're going to continue to fall way behind. Okay, accountability. Our students, for the most part, are held accountable for their mistakes or missteps. However, some of the staff and administration who mete out these consequences to our youth are not being held accountable for their mistakes and or missteps. And that's a real problem. When we bring information and proof that a mistake or a misstep, and I'm being gracious with my words, there's been either nothing done, we've been asked what should be done, or it's just completely being ignored. How can we trust you, the school board, when you correct, I put that in air quotes, the children, and let the adults, in air quotes, go without any accountability? I know some discipline is not disclosed to us, the public. However, when I see similar instances continuing to occur, that lets me know that there's one of two answers. Nothing was done, or what was done wasn't sufficient. And that needs to be changed. Because if you're correct our children, you can't stand there and be a hypocrite and not be accountable for your own mistakes. So I need some answers. The board already knows what the issues are, and I'll be waiting for an answer from you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other comments from the public? Moving on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, I just have a few updates. The overflow parking at the elementary school bids that will go out, the bid we published this week, so we can look for that in the Southside Sentinel and post it to our website. That is still on schedule from once we finally got onto a schedule to be completed before the school opens next school year. But that will be published in this week's Sentinel. Our navigators of the quarter, we are about to finish our, believe it or not, our second quarter, which would be our first semester of the year, and nomination forms will go out next week to staff and families to nominate staff members who exemplify our strategic objective for deeper learning. And so we can look for those to come out. As I shared, calendar surveys will be sent out tomorrow for staff and families to review and provide feedback. We did send out from our HR department, letters of intent went out today for our staff members to indicate to us whether they are planning to return, going to make other career decisions or retire, or they're undecided at this time. We do use that information to plan for both budget and potential open positions and for health insurance and what our spending costs would be, because that's one of the questions also. So those are the updates I had for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Seitz. And now I will hear a motion to go into our closed session. We can, well, we can do what we're going to discuss. Second. You have the language.
I have a
Bear with me, you need to get the language to.
You need the reading.
No, that's not it.
You need to read it.
No, that's not it.
Okay.
I believe we're going to, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session, to discuss student and legal matters. I think, Ms. Robbins, you made the motion? Second. All in favor? We're now in closed session. We're coming out. Oh, we're not on campus. The chair will now entertain a motion to go out of closed session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Pursuant to the Code of Virginia, the board discussed personnel matters during closed session. Matters discussed in closed session have been added to the consent agenda and other parts of the agenda as action and information items. Members of the board, please certify that only lawful matters were discussed in closed session. Board members will respond by roll call vote.
Mr. Kennedy. Dr. Burnett
Yes.
and Mrs. Robbins.
So certified.
All right, the items have been added to the consent agenda. I believe I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we are returned to the open meeting. Which we've done. So is there any old business? Is there any new business? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. I was